So today we're going to dive into a story that's really about family drama, but like on a national stage. We're talking about Caroline Giuliani, Rudy Giuliani's daughter.
Right.
And she came out and very publicly endorsed Kamala Harris, which is interesting in itself, but it's even more interesting when you consider her father's ties to Trump.
Yeah, and I think what's really fascinating here is that it's not just about a difference of political opinion. This is really a story about a daughter who's grappling with the very real consequences of the choices that her father has made politically.
Absolutely. And, it's important to remember Caroline Giuliani, she's not just Rudy's daughter. This is a woman with her own, career, her own identity. She's a filmmaker. She's a political activist. And she's been a vocal supporter of Democrats in the past, like Obama and Clinton.
And she has been, even when her dad was back in the other side.
Exactly.
And I think what's different this time around is that it's not just about who she's supporting. It's about the way she's framing her endorsement. She's not just saying, well, I disagree with my dad. And she's coming out and saying, my father's involvement with Trump led to his downward spiral. That's a pretty serious accusation.
And a really loaded statement, especially when you think about Rudy Giuliani's career. Right? I mean, this is a man who was once hailed as America's mayor for leading New York after 9/11. And now here he is facing criminal charges alongside Trump. That's a pretty incredible fall from grace.
And it's that fall from grace that is really at the crux of her argument. Because essentially what she's implying is that Trump has a way of negatively impacting those closest to him, and she's using her father as the prime example.
And she doesn't even stop there. She goes on to suggest that this downward spiral, that it's a pattern that she's observed among other people who have been in Trump's inner circle.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, is she trying to be strategic here? Or is she speaking from a place of having witnessed this firsthand and truly believing this pattern exists?
It's a bold claim, and it definitely adds another layer to her endorsement. But even taking a step back and looking at the endorsement itself, her Instagram post with Kamala Harris, she uses this really interesting language. She says, please, and it's in all caps, please join me in uniting behind Kamala Harris to stop Trump. It's now or never. There's a real sense of urgency. I think even desperation in her plea.
Yeah, absolutely. And she connects her personal experience with her father to like the fate of the nation. She talks about, feeling this loss of her dad to Trump and then saying that she cannot bear to lose our country to him too. I mean, she's drawing a direct line between her family and the future of America.
It's a really powerful way to try to connect with voters who might have felt similar anxieties or, concerns about where the country was headed under Trump's presidency. But it's also really interesting to note, this isn't the first time that Caroline has publicly disagreed with her father politically.
Yeah, she's kind of known for going her own way. I mean, she supported Obama in 2008. She supported Hillary Clinton in 2016, even when her father was on the other side of those races. So this isn't just a one-time act of rebellion. It seems like she really is committed to forming her own political identity, even when it clashes with her family's.
And what's interesting is that despite these very public disagreements, she's still saying that she loves her father. Like in the article, she says, my dad and I have a cartoonishly complicated relationship, but he is still my father. And despite his faults, I love him.
Which just adds such a human element to all of this.
Right.
It'd be very easy to make this into a story about, a complete estrangement, but she's going out of her way to emphasize the complexity, to say you can love someone and still fundamentally disagree with their choices, and that's powerful.
It really is.
Yes.
And it's that nuance that I think makes her message resonate more, because it's harder to dismiss her as someone who's just trying to spite her father. She's coming from a place of, real pain and concern. It really speaks to how complicated family relationships can be. It's not always one or the other. It's not always I love you or I disagree with you. And I think what's so interesting about Caroline Giuliani is that she has a history of being really open. Even when we're talking about things that are considered controversial. I mean, remember that Vanity Fair piece that she wrote a while back about being polyamorous?
Oh, yeah, that's right. And she was really open in that, too, talking about being in this 3-person relationship. So do you think that plays into how we understand her stance on her dad and Trump, like this history of being so open?
I think it's definitely relevant because it shows this pattern of her being willing to just be herself. You know what I mean? Societal norms, whatever. It doesn't seem to faze her. And I think it shows that this isn't just about politics. This is about her being comfortable expressing her truth, whether it's about her personal life or her political beliefs.
So it's less about trying to be shocking and more about her just being consistently, authentically herself.
Right, exactly. And that's what makes her such an interesting political figure, because she doesn't fit neatly into a box. She's not just an extension of her father's politics. She's not defined by that last name. She really is charting her own path. And I think it's this willingness to kind of like challenge the status quo, whether it's about relationships or politics, that makes her someone worth paying attention to.
And it makes her relatable too, because who hasn't had those awkward, difficult conversations with family members about politics? Especially these days.
Oh, absolutely. It's a tale as old as time, right?
Sure.
Especially in this political climate, it feels like everyone's going through it. This feeling of like, do I stand up for what I believe in, or do I just try to keep the peace?
Exactly. And I think what Caroline Giuliani's story does, even though it is so specific to her and her family, it also highlights that really universal experience.
For sure. And it makes you think about how to actually navigate those conversations productively. Like, how do you speak your truth, especially when it's about something that you feel really strongly about, without alienating the people that you love who might see things totally differently?
And it's not like she's offering us any easy answers, but I feel like just putting it out there so publicly, it forces people to acknowledge that tension.
It does. And her experience being the child of someone who's so polarizing, I mean, that just adds this whole other layer to the conversation, doesn't it? Because it's not just about disagreeing on policy. It's about what happens when those political beliefs have real world consequences for your family.
It makes you wonder, though, what if more people, especially people who are in the public eye, what if they were this open about these struggles? Would it help create more empathy in our political landscape, or would it just make the divisions even worse?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? Because if we can't even talk about this stuff, openly and honestly, how can we ever expect to find common ground?
Yeah, for sure.
And it goes back to, I think, what Caroline Giuliani is really trying to say, which is this isn't just about her family. This isn't just about politics. This is about the future of America, and whether or not we're willing to actually face these tough questions.
It really hits home that political beliefs aren't just these abstract things we debate online, They have real consequences for people's lives and relationships.
Right. And I think Caroline Giuliani's story, in a way, kind of embodies that, like the human cost of when we become so polarized. It's a reminder that it's not theoretical. This stuff really does affect people in a very real way.
And it challenges us to do better, right?
Yeah.
To figure out how to have these really difficult conversations without sacrificing our values or our relationships, to be able to look at someone who thinks differently and still see them as a human being.
It's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
But it's something that we have to at least try to figure out if we want to get past all of this division, right?
Mm-hmm.
To find some kind of common ground, even when we disagree.
And I think what's so powerful about Caroline Giuliani's story is just seeing her courage to actually speak out, to say what she believes, even when it's hard, even when it means going up against someone as powerful as her own father.
Yeah.
And it's inspiring. It reminds us that we all have a voice, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just stand up for what you believe in.
And, maybe even pave the way for other people to do the same. If she can do it, maybe we can too.
Right, exactly. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive on Caroline Giuliani and her very public stand, what are your final thoughts?
Well, I think it really highlights just how personal politics can be and how important it is to be able to have these conversations, even when they're tough, because the alternative is so much worse.
I think that's a great place to leave it. It's definitely something to think about.
Absolutely.
Well, that's it for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Turn the dial to the daily news. Turn the dial to the daily news. Turn the dial to the daily news. Bringing voices, headlines, and shoes. You turn the dial to the daily news.